Okay, once again, welcome to the SpreadAgile Agile Talk. That we have been doing some of these sessions for the last few months about SpreadAgile. Some of you know this is a platform that was organized, created for you, all of you. So this is by by three certified Scrum trainers, Nanda Lankalapalli, you see there. Hi, Nanda. And Suresh Konduru, myself, and Vijay Bandaru. We have one more CST. He couldn't join today. He's traveling. So we kind of know each other for the last several years. We talk to each other, we help each other, and we thought, why don't we make an impact on the community that we live in a more positive way? So a couple of years back, we have been discussing about how can we do that? How can we bring hundreds of people together? And that's where we kind of thought an initial idea of organizing a regional Scrum gathering. And last year, some of you would have joined. We did the regional Scrum gathering, Scrum Alliance event in September 2020, amidst all this pandemic and various circumstances we are going through. And it was a huge success. We had at least 600 people on that event, one of the largest Scrum Alliance regional gatherings. And we thought, that's a good idea. And how can we sustain this? And that's where we started this SpreadAgile as a platform, where we do a lot of Agile talks, Agile chats, a lot of debates, Scrum Master open space that we did last month. And we invite international speakers, serious Agile practitioners, where they can share their success stories, little failure stories as well, so that we can learn from there. Experience can be both either ways. And this month we have Mark. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. For a little introduction to everyone. Mark, I'll still leave it to you for you to say about yourself. But thank you for accepting our invite. And when I sent an email to Mark, in fact, a large group of certified Scrum trainers with Scrum Alliance, Mark is one of the first to respond and say, hey, I want to be a part of this. I want to talk something about this, learn and share my experiences as well. And we are pretty delighted to have Mark on this session. And Mark has been in the industry and has been teaching, doing Agile ever since Agile Manifesto was born in the year 2001. That's what I believe so. And has over 30 years of experience, I believe so, in the industry, pretty much combined. Thank you. And Mark has also released 2 ebooks. Maybe you can quickly go over his LinkedIn profile or something. But Mark, frankly, we are so excited to have you on this platform. And I'm going to make you a host now. And you can manage the whole show. And we are all looking forward.
Cool. And I request everyone to turn on the videos as much as you could so that we can see the faces and talk rather than looking at the blank screens. If you don't want to show what you're eating, that's okay. You can turn off, but I would like to see most of the people turning on the videos. Thank you so much.
Yes, it's actually always delightful to see people. Thank you. Trust me, it's really hard to speak to a blank screen. I don't know if any of you tried this professionally at work or otherwise, when all you see is black spaces in a gallery view in Zoom. It's really hard to actually put some energy into it and speak to people because you have no idea if people are reacting. Now, I am just learning to use, so I've just switched back to a Mac after a number of years on Windows. So if there are any embarrassing technical moments, it's not my Mac's fault. It's the fact that my brain hasn't quite adjusted to being a Mac user again. So laugh along with me when I make mistakes. 1, 2, a gentle word of warning. So some colleagues have warned me. They said very clearly, your sense of humor may not translate well around the world. Okay, so I'm going to take a really big risk with you and warn you in advance. I'm a fairly sarcastic person, and I use sarcasm as an attempt to highlight problems in many organizations and to laugh a little about what I see going on, as opposed to because I feel too often if we take it too seriously, we might be required to cry. So my belief is that we should laugh about things that go wrong and not cry. Okay, but also be aware then you're going to get a fair amount of sarcasm. If it helps, if you know any Brits in your world, I am a recovering Brit. I was born in the UK. I live in Canada. So if you need a lens to help you understand the sense of humor, just imagine your most British friend, and then you've got my sense of humor pegged, and you'll have a fairly good understanding of what's going on. So I have been attempting to be agile for something like 20 years now. As was already hinted, I stumbled across Agile around a short while after the manifesto. Nothing more than luck. I don't claim to have been smart. I don't claim to have been prescient. I simply started doing it because it looked more interesting than what we were doing at that time, which was not Agile, and I won't try to tell you what we were doing. So enough about my background. Let's get on to this retrospective stuff. So, like everybody else on the planet, and yes, it's already been commented on, thank you, Suresh, I have an ebook. At least it's free. Enough said. You can find it on my website. I'm sure I'll plug it once or twice more, but I think enough plugging. Let us move on. Ask questions as we go. I'm going to make sure that the chat, I can actually see the chat. When you have a question, throw it into the chat. I'm also fairly informal. If you have a deeper question that needs a conversation, we should open up the microphones and let you speak, because when I actually run real workshops are around conversation, not me standing in front of a room and talking at people. That'd be like boring. So ask questions as we go. That's cool. Now, hint, this is totally science-based, right? You believe that, right? I've got lots and lots of science and data to back everything up I'm going to say. Sarcasm alert. Sarcasm alert. Here's the science. I surveyed on Twitter, why have your retrospectives gone bad? What are your top reasons? Okay, so a third of my friends, and remember, my first problem with my Twitter survey is it only surveys my friends and the people who are willing to respond to me. That's a fairly bad sampling mechanism. But a third of people say their retrospectives are boring. Nearly half of people never make any changes. And the last batch get teams that don't make improvement decisions. Okay. And apparently one person in my survey used their retrospective as a buffer to actually do, quote, real work. Part of me wants to mourn at that moment. At least the other groups were attempting to hold retrospectives. So, okay, first survey source wasn't good, so we need metadata. So I went to LinkedIn, probably asked exactly the same people on LinkedIn I asked on Twitter, and stunningly enough, I got different answers. Their retrospectives were stale and boring, they had endless discussions, and they had vague actions. Okay. But if this is going to be fun, we need our own polls. So I'm going to send you to Menti, but ignore the number here. It's the wrong number. I'm going to get you to use the code here because the slides had to be updated. So I need to know, what is your Agile superpower? So go to menti.com and type in the code 75209833. And you tell us what your superpower is. And if Menti actually works for me, in the next few seconds, the screen will start to update. If it doesn't, we can make jokes about bad technology.
Can you repeat the code?
75209833. And if I have my wits, I might even type that into the chat. That would be like clever. Degree in computing science and all makes you clever, right?
Okay, just drop the link.
Oh, even better, Nanda. Oh, you're good at this game. Yeah. I threw in the code, you threw in the link.
Yeah.
Well played, my friend. So far, Indian people in India are, in fact, the most empathetic people on the planet. Nice to see. You also up-level team members. Nobody does stakeholder Aikido. That leaves me with an interesting question. Is Aikido not something that's popular as a concept in India, or is it just that the other ones are better choices?
Mark, just to say, Aikido, we feel that it's like more like a show thing, but people don't believe in Aikido. Like the way how they twist people's arm and then pull them. So probably that is one reason.
Thank you, Vijay. Kind of sad because good Aikido is actually beautiful art to watch. Okay, and it looks like the winner is, so I think in first place, you up-level your team members or mentor them. In second place, you have empathy. And in third place, some of you have a very cold and icy stare. That's awesome. Personally, while I should say empathy, I love the cold, icy stare for killing impediments. Okay. So, data source 3, random comments from friends. So thank you. You guys are going to be a source of data for this presentation. I used another data source. I asked my friends, what are their problems? We've got teams not solving real root causes. They're just swatting at flies. We've got somebody of power dictating the discussions and the solutions. An old friend said that teams conclude they have no influence and therefore they don't bother to put the effort into improvement because what the hell, it's not their problem anymore. Right. What are your retro pain points? So this should bring up slide number 2. What are your retrospective pain points? So if Mentimeter is working, you should now be able to enter the second one where you have pain. Where is your pain? I have no idea how Mentimeter works. Do you all see the second slide on the second question for Mentimeter?
Yes, we see that.
Okay, good. Damn glad this degree in computing science paid off for me. This is
Hey,
fun.
Mark, I have a quick question. Where do you actually put lack of participation?
Not enough choices. Sorry, I think that was Sai. Sorry, Sai. Simply not enough choice. Simply not enough choices for you. I guess that's another one. Or maybe why is it you have not enough participation? Is it because you have stale retrospectives? Is it because you have? Why is it people don't participate? If you think about it,
sorry, that could also go back to some of these actions or causes. No participation because there is no action last time. I didn't want to waste my time again, possibly.
Yep, exactly. I was going to point out that the real purpose of this exercise is to get your brain engaged because it's late in your evening. You need your brain to start being engaged for why are your teams back at your place of work in pain, not what are my theoretical reasons in my presentation, but what's the real pain you face. The action of thinking about it now, if you've done any study of speed reading or learning or anything else like that, you'll know by taking the time up front to think about a problem, you prime your brain to be receptive to the potential ideas and solutions. So this is less an exercise in gathering data for a presentation, because clearly I can't change on the fly. I'd like to pretend I'm good, but I'm not that good. The real benefit is that your brain is now thinking about why your real teams back at the place of work are in pain. And therefore, you're starting to think about where you'd like to make improvements and what win you'd like out of this exercise. Okay. So these are my top 10 sins. They're based on my years of experience doing Agile with real teams. And has been hinted already, I've been around the game for a few years. So I haven't seen everything, but I've seen enough to have a rough idea. Now, word of warning, the cure comes after the problems. So you're going to say, how do I solve? How do I solve? How do I solve? Don't worry, we'll get there. Problem number 1, boring retrospectives. Have any of you ever seen a team member fall asleep in a retrospective? Put their head on the table. No, you've not. Our panel has not seen a team member fall asleep in a retrospective. Okay, I'm delighted you have not, but I take it you have seen a team member do this. Have you ever seen a team member look up at the ceiling and sigh? Okay, yes. Okay, that's almost as bad as falling asleep. So we need to make sure our retrospectives are engaging enough for the team members that they want to wish they have a desire to come back. Next one. They talk a whole ton. Well, what the hell? They're engaged enough. They talk. That's a good thing. Too bad they don't conclude any actions. You got them to the action phase. Congratulations. Your team is actually coming along. But the actions are vague. One of my favorites. Have any of you met the team that say the following? We would like to do more unit testing. What's more? Is it effective? Is writing 1 unit test a sprint more than you were doing before? Was that good or was that enough? Were you writing 0 unit test to sprint prior to that 1 was good? More is a bit vague, isn't it? Hint, if the actions are vague, you are unlikely to achieve them. Failure to review past improvements. So congratulations, now you're making improvements. You're going in the right direction. If you don't do some form of review of the past improvements, it is difficult to tell whether the past improvements have actually improved the team or they were just random. Heroes. Anybody got a team member who stands up every time there's a problem and says, yes, I will take this on. Yes, I will do something for the team. Yes, 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 it will be me. What's the problem with your heroes? Why is it bad to have heroes in a team?
Lack of collective ownership. I mean, everyone should be, taking ownership.
Thank you.
It's basically a teamwork, and just one person cannot, do everything.
Mm-hmm.
That means there is no contribution from the other team members. You're dominating the whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
That is not being agile, actually. You're not making the others agile.
Right. Okay. For bonus points, what happens if that hero ever leaves the team? Okay.
So it's like we are trying to make it more person dependent, but we want it to be like process dependent. So if a person leaves, then the team will be like automatic failure. People can't they can't move forward.
So it's not that heroes are awful. It's that too much heroism will wind up leaving the team with exactly one person who's good at doing some things and improving, and everybody else relies on the hero. Another favorite, for those of us who have gardens, perennials are things that pop up year after year. In your garden, a perennial is a beautiful thing because it requires less effort and less labor. Unfortunately, with your problems, perennial problems are the problems that pop up and keep on popping up and never go away. What do you think happens with perennial problems in the long run? How do people feel about them?
They just get frustrated and eventually ignore it or leave it, or they would leave the organization.
Yeah, thank you. I believe that was Sai again. Thank you, Sai. So yeah, people just get frustrated and they ignore the problem. And then the problem becomes the background. And sometimes people say the magic words, yeah, that's just the way things happen around here. Now, I want to be very careful. This is not meant to say that managers are bad humans. Okay? But what do you think happens when you put a manager in a retrospective?
Psychological safety is compromised.
His approach changes to the problem solving. He tries to think as a manager in a different way.
They try to think of as a manager, and as Vijay suggested, your psychological safety goes out the window because they're a person of power, and because they're a person of power, team members can no longer be as open and honest as they need to be about pain points and problems. Okay, well played.
And also he thinks like within the schedule, I need to finish the project.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be on that.
Yep. Okay. And then we have the rushed retrospective. Team members feel pressured. They feel pressure to get something out the door. They show up in the retrospective. They show up in body for half an hour. In mind, they show up for only 15 minutes. They rush. And their goal is to get out the door as fast as possible so they can get back to doing the code. And last, my favorite, the dominator. Now, I don't know. This is an interesting question. Is the dominator a North American only problem, or does the dominator show up in India?
It depends on the person.
I'm pretty sure it's not just a North American problem. It's a human thing.
It's an attitude problem. Basically,
it's across the board.
Problem. Yeah.
Oh, darn. You're saying that humans in India are the same as humans everywhere else in the world.
Global issue.
Darn, I was hoping that you guys were the ones that had perfected humanity and that we could just learn from you on that one. Oh, darn.
That's because ego is ego everywhere, Mark.
True. Okay. So any other reasons that you see your retrospectives going bad? Throw a few in the chat. Lack of trust in process. Thank you, V. Bov. I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly. I'm trying to learn fast. Not engaging all team members, availability issue, still learning about Agile, sometimes not to speak about the issues. It's basically about the mindset. Okay, and you're coming fast enough now that I can't thank you all by name, so take a blanket thank you. Oh, unclear agenda. Oh, and I love blame game. Yes. I bet with blame, you get shame for bonus points because blame and shame usually go together. Thank you all. So the cure or the improvements. So it's not magical. People seem to think that we're going to make our teams better. You hear all sorts of people make promises in books. If you do the following thing, in a year's time, you will be 100% better and you will deliver twice as much value, half the amount of time. Some of you might even recognize a book title there. I don't believe that stuff. I believe that real improvement happens 1% at a time. One tiny improvement at a time. That's real. Okay. So some things I found that help with retrospectives. Start off with establishing simple ground rules. If any of you are familiar with working agreements as a concept, this is just working agreements extended to the retrospective. So respect yourself. Silence is okay. Whatever is your working agreements for your team. I won't know what are the right working agreements for your team in your retrospective, but establish ground rules and get the team to join with you in establishing the ground rules so they're not imposed. They're a group of colleagues working together. Now, this is a slightly deeper one. Have any of you come across the idea of systems thinking before?
Yeah.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, okay. I'm getting 2 smiles, okay? This is awesome. You're doing way better than a lot of audiences on this one, frankly. Okay, so the underlying idea of systems thinking is that very often what appears to be the problem and therefore the solution on the surface is actually just a symptom. So systems thinking asks us to take a second and sometimes a third order view of the world to see what are the deeper things going on in the system that are causing people to behave in the way they do. So what I challenge you to do with your teams is start to look at the world from a systemic perspective. When you see a problem, ask yourself, what about the system sets things up in the way they are today? Okay. So I don't know a lot about the current Indian political dialogue. I'm going to take a risk here. In North America at the moment, we're starting to have a discussion around something called systemic racism. It turns out that in North America, police forces pay attention to people, probably because of the neighborhood they live in, and to some degree because of their background, ethnic, skin color, or otherwise. Deeply sad. Why do they do that? Probably the individuals who do it themselves are not individually bad. Probably something about the system is triggering them to behave this way. So systems thinking causes us to step back and ask, why are otherwise good people behaving in ways that are provably strange or weird, ways that we wouldn't respect? Systems thinking then challenges us to look more deeply at the system to see why the system is set up that way and what could we do to make the improvement in the system. Now, that I don't know if the policing version will have landed well in India, because I have no idea if you're having that discussion at the moment in India. Just trying to figure out what analogy I could share that would help you see if you view through the systems thinking lens, you will always be looking for why is our world, what is going on in my world? Why is it happening that way? And what things are affecting people who are otherwise sane to behave in ways that are odd? I'm getting some smiles, so somebody can think of something. Does anybody think of an analogy that would work in your world? No, don't worry. It's too much at this stage in the day. Hint, favor systemic fixes over quick fixes. How many of you are conducting, or no, nobody wants to admit that. So it's not you. It's your evil predecessor. How many of you showed up on a team and shortly after you showed up on a team, discovered that the team had been conducting exactly the same retrospective for the past year? What went well? What went poorly? What could we do to improve in the next sprint? And remember, it wasn't you, it was your evil predecessor. So none of you are admitting a crime. You're all simply telling us what happened with your evil predecessor. Okay. So why would we want to switch up our retrospective style or agenda or approach on a regular basis?
Avoid that monotonous thing so that people can get more creative. We don't want it to be like a zombie scrum or monotonous, like we come, we give. It's like becomes a very stereotype.
Okay.
To welcome participation.
Good.
I would do it for that.
Okay. Why else? So to avoid zombies, to welcome participation, why else do you want to change up the style of your retrospective on a regular basis?
To make people think and not get in a comfort zone or their usual way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. And the last is to make sure that we're always thinking about things from a different angle and therefore different problems, or if they're the same problems, new ways of viewing them. Okay, somebody's conducting growth and journey style retrospectives. That's awesome. Somebody else is using 4 Ls. I must admit, I'm not familiar with that one. That is remarkable. If you've never changed your retrospective style before, it can be daunting. If that's the case, so there are a whole bunch of links at the end of the presentation, but you're going to find there's a website called the Retromat. And the Retromat has, I think, 130 different retrospective activities. Now, if you've used the Retromat a dozen times, it shouldn't be the last place you stop in the world. But if you've never changed your retrospective before, the Retromat can really help people who've never mixed it up pick a bunch of new activities, knowing that other people have vetted them and tested them and put effort into documenting them, and therefore they've reduced the cost of you making a change so that you can take on change in something different at low risk. And it's founded in an easy to remember website called retromat.org. And yes, Nanda has pointed out there are 7 books on retrospective, including by a wonderful Indian woman, one of the recent ones. And I like her book because hers is the most original book I've seen on retrospectives. And I've read nearly every book on retrospectives there is. Okay, it's not necessarily the most well-written, but you got to admire somebody who put her first book out there, and it's different from every other damn book on retrospectives. That goes a long way in my mind. Next up-level your facilitation skills. How many of us this is one that takes vulnerability to be honest. How many of us have actually put time and effort into thinking about how to improve the skills as a facilitator, and how many of us just facilitate by the seat of our pants? And let's be clear, it took me about 10 to 15 years to admit that I was too much of a seat of a pants facilitator, and that I actually had to dig into what does it take to facilitate well. So if you're still seat of the pants, congratulations. Chance to up level. Decision-making protocols. So one way to avoid endless debate is to use some form of a protocol on decision-making. Fist of 5 is a simple one. I should check in the Indian context, do any of these finger gestures mean anything rude that you might want to evolve or change differently?
Luckily not.
Okay. Nicely played. I take it Arpan there, therefore thumbs up is also acceptable in the Indian context. Thank you for showing me that. Okay, you have to check. I am learning to deal with different cultures slowly. Okay, so this is one decision-making protocol. There are other decision-making protocols out there. The trick is to be aware of what your team's decision-making protocol is and use it as a facilitator to ask people, could we cut off discussion at this moment? Have we got good enough discussion? Another decision-making tool I think many of you have probably encountered is dot voting. I use this if I need to get a rough idea among a large number of choices where people want to put their energy to go next. Now, moving on. So we talked about wishful thinking earlier. Then you need to make your actions more concrete, more specific. So, a simple thing, if somebody says something vague, like, we want to do more unit testing, or we want to do X better. The X thing that they want to do better is not the action, it's the goal. Get people to restate, take down the goal, take the goal, it's a nice goal, and ask them, what's the first concrete step you would take towards that goal? So I've recently made an effort to learn speed reading because I'd like to digest ideas faster and with better retention and better, etc. Okay, speed reading, that's a goal. Not a very useful goal in and of itself. I wrote a concrete action. I decided I was going to read X number of chapters of a specific book on speed reading, one, and then I said how long I was going to take to do it and what the outcome was going to be. And then two, I actually set down some actions for practice with some intended goals on the improvement I was going to see in speed reading. You don't actually care about my speed reading journey. What you care is that you can take a goal that's vague like that, decompose vague goals into more specific actions. Simple test for your team. If you say to your team, great, that looks like a goal to me, and they say, no, it's an action, ask them, what are the first few steps you will take this sprint, this next sprint, to improve the situation? If they already know exactly what they'll do, they probably don't need to decompose it further. If they waffle around and they're unsure, then it's probably time to actually challenge them to go create an action. Next interesting one. How many of you bring your actions into your sprint process? Wave a hand or something if you already do it, or say in the chat, or... So I bring them in 3 ways. Step 1, bring your actions into sprint planning, your improvement actions into sprint planning. Okay, it's a very funny thing. If you think about it, we often walk into sprint planning, and the first thing the team does is they commit to a list of they commit to a list of stories. And when the sprint starts, they say, oh, we no longer have time to take on the improvements or the action. Why? Because we overcommitted to the stories. So I'm going to give you a funny trick. In the sprint planning, the first thing you might discuss is an action item you are committing to improving. Once you've committed to improving an action item in the sprint planning first, then take on your sprint goal, then take on the stories towards the sprint goal. But it's a funny trick psychologically. By saying the action first, psychologically, your brain has said the action is first and it is important. Okay. Arpan and somebody else had a hand up.
Yeah, Mark, so pretty quick. What I prefer is that we start with undone work. So which we say is the work we left in the sprint plus the action items that needs to be, that was discussed in the retrospection that we had to, in the sprint planning. So does that sound correct, or should I?
Correct is a funny thing. Let's remember, Scrum is a game. It's a game a group of people agree to play together. Is it helping your team? If it's helping your team and that they are frequently achieving their action items, congratulations. If your team are not frequently achieving their action items from your sprint retrospective, try something different. So please remember, retrospectives, if you read the Scrum Guide, what does it say about retrospectives? I think it says you should conduct a retrospective. It probably even says very little about, I think it says something about the time, but what it says about the time is only with respect to a month-long sprint. And that's really all the Scrum Guide says about retrospectives. So when we say what is correct, what's correct is what's working for you and your team. I have hints, I have suggestions, I have ideas that might help you. If my ideas help you, this is wonderful. If my ideas don't help you, I cry a bit and you move on and you find better ideas. If my ideas don't help you, you should send me an email telling me what did work better so that I can learn myself and make notes to be better the next time I tell people anything. That's actually a serious point. I'm really easy to find on the internet. I think you'll find my email address buried in my book. I think it's pretty obvious from my website. I'm mark@agilepainrelief.com. Shoot me an email. Tell me what did or didn't work. I'll make notes. So I got you to think about including your action items in the sprint planning. My personal preference is first. If that's working for your team, great. If a different version is working for your team, that's great too. I next want you to put them in the sprint backlog. Again, I'm a fan of putting them at the top. I put them at the top of the sprint backlog because it makes people's brains think they are the most important thing. It reminds people it is important to improve. And then the last way I bring your action items into your sprint is I bring them into the next retrospective. In your next sprint retrospective, I invite people to review past action items. Okay. Next up, often we jump from rough guesses about what happened in a sprint to making statements about what actions we should take. But we jump from down here. We saw a few things to all the way up here, a change. Those changes are quite likely to be random because we didn't go through inference. Have any of us seen a team where some small thing went wrong and the team member said, oh, we should stop doing unit? I know you had a problem where a merge went wrong or a unit test failed and a unit test was really difficult to debug or something else of that nature. And the team say, oh, we should stop doing unit testing, or we should stop doing this practice or stop doing that practice. There's a disconnect between the pool of observable data and the action they took. The action they take is all they're recommending is almost random. So I don't think that we're going to get to the scientific level with most teams. Have any of you started to track metrics, useful metrics? So hint, velocity is not the most useful metric. In fact, if you're familiar with how velocity could go wrong, you probably realize velocity is one of the worst metrics out there. I might track things like, the notes will have more, but we might look into things like cycle time. Well, in fact, I think I get real data. Any of us familiar with cumulative flow diagrams? Couple, yep. Okay. So I've got cumulative flow diagram will show you your work in progress. It will show you your average cycle time. It will show you your lead time. You can use that as one source of data. But there's more. Now, this is a bit funky and hard to read. This is dealing with cycle time to look for cycle time variance. So pop back for a half second if I can. It's not going to let me. Sorry, I haven't figured out how to control PowerPoint on my Mac yet. This is embarrassing. Okay, so cycle time is when you measure how long an item takes from when it is started to when it is finished. Pretend your team has made some effort to improve its average cycle time so that your average is becoming quite reasonable. You might then want to look at the outliers, because the outlier tasks are the ones that took the longest and probably had the most problems and have the richest information about where your team could yet improve. So this is a cycle time, I believe you call this a cycle time scatter plot, if my language is correct. Sorry, my background is not in statistics. And you would look at this and you would look to see which items had cycle time so far above the average that they had information to tell us about what took a long time and why they got stuck. Can you see if you looked at the ones that took the longest and you improved the areas where there was pain and the items that took the longest, then in the long run, you would actually also reduce all of your average cycle times because you would take care of your worst pain points. Last one. Did you know how your team is feeling as a team is actually a source of data? So this is morale. Now, popular a few years ago to measure in the Agile world was happiness. And I really do want everybody on the planet, and I'm not actually joking, I really do want everybody on the planet to be happy. However, I have to tell you that if I were to attempt to measure your team's happiness, their happiness is influenced by a lot of things that are not related to your team and your work. Consider when you measure somebody's happiness, their happiness in a given day might be measured by, well, since we're all working from home, I suspect your happiness might be measured by your interactions with your family members. Or if you're not living with other people, your happiness might be measured by how lonely you are feeling being on your own in a pandemic. Your happiness, pretend we actually go back to working in an office. Yes, your happiness is measured by your work-life balance. Your happiness might also be measured by how you feel about commuting if and when we ever go back to working in offices. Yes, and your happiness might be measured by if your sleep last night was good. Morale is how willing are you to support your team members. Morale is a measure of a team. happiness is a measure of the individual. So again, in the links at the end, because I am the king of links, in the links at the end, there's a very excellent Dutch gentleman, a gentleman named Christian, and I can't say his last name, so I won't try. He has put together a free morale survey that you can do with your team. You do with your team as frequently as you want. Hint, I probably wouldn't do it quarterly. I probably measure morale probably monthly. If you measure the morale of your team, then you can start to see where your team feels strong and where it feels unsupported, and you might start to take actions to improve morale. But just as importantly, you could see if your actions to improve cycle time, did they harm morale? Maybe you improved the cycle time, but harmed the team's morale, which actually would leave you in a bad place in the long run. So I want some form of metric about the work, so cycle time and maybe work in progress. Some form of metric about the humans to make sure that we're actually treating our humans in a way that keeps them wanting to work with us and keep going in our game. Now, back to actions. If the actions I introduced you to earlier, so somebody's actually checking in every sprint to see if we're confident about achieving the completion of items. That's a good thing. I'm not sure if that's a measurement, but I certainly do like it in sprint planning. Do we actually believe that the thing we've set up is achievable? Yep, I like that one. So experiments trump actions. If you are dealing with a problem and the problem is big and you've tried decomposing your goal, your vague goal into actions in the way I showed you earlier, and that is not working, consider designing more formal experiments and a more formal experiment process. So I've given you an example here. In order to reduce the amount of time it takes to finish development as a team member, I want to limit WIP, or work in progress. I'm sure we're all fairly familiar with that as a classic example if we've seen any Kanban stuff. What's interesting about this one is then stating at the bottom what it is you're measuring. So having gathered data already on your cycle time or whatever your other data source is, now you can state how you're going to improve it so you can see after a few sprints, if we take this action, did we get the outcome we thought we would achieve? Can you see if we take a model like this, we're starting to build a pseudoscientific process into our retrospectives? I want to be careful. I'm not going to claim that this is rigorous real science. I don't think any of us have any reason or desire to conduct random controlled blind studies on our teams. Team 1 will do the following, team 2 will do the following, then see what actually works. I think that would be insane. But can you see, if you start to gather data around things like cycle time or morale, and you start to design small quasi-experiment-like things, and you write down in advance what your expectations are, we're starting to bring a little bit more rigor to our work. And therefore, by doing it, we're more likely to suss out which improvements actually improve things and which things were just random. If that last appealed to you, there's an even more rigorous experimental process. It comes from a guy in the UK, a gentleman named Mike Burrows. Mike Burrows wrote a book called Agenda Shift. He's familiar to many people because he wrote a book first about Kanban. His first book on Kanban is called Kanban from the Inside. It's a good book. Okay, but his Agenda Shift book is a lot more interesting. It's about changing organizations, shifting their agenda. In that book, he teaches you how to write very rigorous org-level change experiments. So if your experiment is beyond the simple experiment template I shared with you a moment ago, why? You've got my friend Mike's A3 template, and anybody who's a fan of the Toyota stuff will have a rough idea what an A3 template is. This is an A3 template on running bigger experiments. Review your experiments in your next retrospective. So you run an experiment, you declare its run length is going to be 1 sprint or maybe 4 sprints. If you think it's going to take a long time to have the effect you want, that's fine. Acknowledge it. Say, we expect this to run for 3 or 4 sprints. But at the end of those 3 or 4 sprints, here's a key thing. You pause the experiment, because good experimenters end their experiments. They evaluate the results. And then they ask themselves, did that experiment work well? Would we like to keep doing it? Would we like to modify the experiment to make it better the next time? Or would we like to just kill it off altogether? All of those are valid. There's no magic. I'm sorry, somebody was probably hoping I'd pull a rabbit out of the hat and give you a magical solution to all of your retrospective problems. I'm sorry, there isn't magic. You've got humans just like I do. And then there are references. So, since you guys have never met me before, let me let you in on a secret. I am the Agile king of references. I'm not sure that we should have kings in the Agile world, but were we to have kings, I do references like nobody's business. So I maintain a glossary on my website. I think you figured out where my website is already. I'm the agilepainrelief.com guy. I maintain a glossary. We are updating our glossary, but when we finish updating it, our reference library will probably again be the world's largest Agile reference library. I can't prove that statement, but it's a great line and it sounds good. So we've got references on retrospectives, including Madhavi's book, if I'm saying her name correctly. And what I loved about her book was she derived her retrospective ideas by telling stories about what actually worked for her in real life. And that makes it quite interesting reading. But there are more references. If you want to learn how to facilitate, there are references on facilitation, including some that are free. If you need more on metrics, why? Well, there are more references. And well, because I can't stop. And since I'll make this available to you afterwards, I'm not going to bore you by going through all these. And if you want more on retrospectives, why, we've got an ebook, and it's got the crappiest cover ever, but the content is good. Too bad about the cover. And yeah, we have the press. I'll make sure after the workshop, or after the workshop, so it's not a workshop, it's a Zoom session, it's a presentation. So first of all, kill the slide share, because you don't need to stare at my slides anymore. Second, let's talk to each other. Third, I'll see if I remember where to find so I'll see if I can find the presentation material on my website. I think I have an idea where to find it, since it is my website. So other questions or challenges you faced that we didn't cover, or ones we did but you want more depth on?
I want to ask you one question. I am Sai here. So I have done an anonymous survey in respect to my retrospective to all the team members, and everybody said retrospective is good, the action points are being covered, and we are able to voice out our problems in an anonymous way. But they say we don't have, or we don't see improvement every sprint on sprint. We don't have something which we want to add to the retrospective every sprint. How do we tackle that challenge?
So they don't want to keep doing retrospectives every sprint because they don't see the value of doing improvement every sprint. Is that correct?
No, they're fine doing the retrospective, but they don't have any point to add, saying, okay, from last sprint to this sprint, I don't see much of change. You know, my work is fine. I'm doing good. I don't have any improvement that I need to undergo, such sort of a thing.
Okay, got it. So first, I'm trying to do two things at once. I'm trying to throw the presentation material into the chat. So I've thrown the ebook link and I've thrown the presentation material into the chat. The presentation material was shared in November via probably SlideShare, but it's shared up on our blog. I've probably tweaked it a little bit since November, but I don't think in any meaningful way. So When I see team members who, so the thing you describe is common. People are in almost a malaise. People are stuck because they aren't feeling any great need to improve. So two things I think that really make a big difference. First, I would change up my retrospective style. If they're answering the questions with, nothing needs improvement, then they've got stuck. So I changed to a different style, a different agenda. I go find totally different retrospective activities. And if you're already familiar with the Retromat and that wasn't helping, then I would try a different, then I try something like Maud Fahy's book. I'm saying her name correctly. Forgive me if I'm not. I like her book because she suggested retrospective styles that were completely different from the normal. That's one. Two, I start to measure your system. If you're measuring your system, so if you measure your system through cycle time and also cycle time and probably cycle time variance in your case, you can probably start to talk with them about, hey, look, when they say there's nothing to improve, all you have to do is show them, we've got a task, pretend our average cycle time for getting a story finished is 9 days. And that's just a random number I invented out of thin air. Pretend you can then show them that once every 3 sprints, you have an item that takes 20 days to complete. That becomes a topic for conversation. What would it take to make that better? So can you see the data will then give you a source for discussion, even if they don't immediately have things they want to discuss? Did that help you? Sorry, Sai, I can't see your face because with 50 people, Zoom doesn't keep all your faces up at once. I'm sorry.
Okay, I have just put on my video and as well as my mic on, so you can see me now.
Good. Did that help a little? So retrospective, yeah. 1, 2 data sources.
Yep, the data sources actually is helping. Yeah, because I'm also reading that Madhavi Agile Retrospective book to get more ways. Yeah, I started reading it already.
Good. If you have that, so whether you download my ebook or you find somebody else's source material, you want to find something that challenges you to look at something called cycle time variance. When you look at cycle time variance, that will force people to confront the fact that some items get done rapidly and some items take forever. And that should force people to have a deeper discussion than just everything's good.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Oh, my pleasure. Vijay, you had something. I think your virtual hand was raised. No, okay. Vijay doesn't have something, or he's had to step away for a moment. That's cool. How do you do cycle time variance in Jira? I don't know. I'm sorry. I think you just said Voldemort out loud. I'm sorry. I don't know what Voldemort is. No, that one didn't. That humor did not land.
I don't think people got the reference.
Sorry, Voldemort is a Harry Potter reference. In Harry Potter, you're not supposed to say the name of the evil wizard. You just said the name of the evil wizard of the Agile world. I make it my mission to be ignorant of how Jira works. However, I'm fairly. Here's how you measure cycle time variance. Can you export from Jira the cycle time of each individual work item? Can you get some report that would allow you to export from Jira how long each chunk of work in the past X number of months has taken? I'm getting somebody nodding, so I think somebody can do it. Good, okay. Now you've done that. Now import that data.
Yeah, we can do all that, yeah.
Okay, well then, so even if you can't measure cycle time variance directly in Jira, you can export so to measure cycle time variance, you have to get data for the cycle time of each individual work item and how long it took to complete. And once you do that, the variance is just you measure the average, and then you look for things that are, say, 2 standard deviations beyond the average. And that's where you've got real variance. Other questions? Vijay, your hand is still up and you're back. So see if your question's up now.
No, I don't have a question, but I would like to share something I advised one of my Scrum Masters. So every time, whenever they went into the retrospective, they have action items and they're doing it, but the Scrum Master felt they're not actually making any progress. And what I asked him is, you know about the 5 dysfunctions of the team, right? So every time you walk into the retrospective, after some actions are taken, just put the 5 dysfunctions and ask the team. So by taking these actions, what dysfunctions you are trying to eliminate, or how is it helping you to move up the triangle? So that is one thing I have tried. I mean, I didn't get any result yet, but it will take some time. So that is one new approach I took. I just want to share it with you. Thank you.
What I like about that is that you're challenging the Scrum Master to tie improvement back to a well-known improvement model, and you're challenging them to reflect to see if the improvements the team is alleging they are making are actually making any real improvement. So it's a variance on my game of data. It's a different approach. It's a good approach. I like. Other questions or things that are going on? Because remember, I'm not the only person out there who's smart and who's done stuff. There are apparently, according to Zoom, 49 smart people here right now. I am only 1/49th of the smartness here. You can get an actionable Agile Jira plugin. Yes, that'll cost you money. Expensive. Yes. Okay. Hint. For those of you looking to calculate cycle time variance, you don't need an expensive Jira. Buy an expensive Jira plugin. If you want to make people rich, please do go make other people rich. I happen to like the Actionable Agile guy. Dan Vicanti is a very good human. I like him very much as a person. Make him rich. Buy his plugin. Now, if you don't want to make Dan Vicanti rich, simply find a way of getting the data. The only data you need is how long each individual item takes, and then you need to learn just a little bit of Excel foo. So Aikido was not good in India. Apparently, it's considered show. So in that case, you need to learn the Excel Kung Fu. And if you learn Excel Kung Fu, you can sum up the cycle times for a large number of individual items, and that will allow you to do a scatter plot of all the items. In fact, it's just a scatter plot chart, that's all. Have fun with Excel. It's your friend. Rag. I can't say your name. I sincerely apologize.
Raghavendra. Go ahead, Raghavendra.
Yes, hi, Mark. It was a great explanation of everything, and thanks, Suresh, for organizing this. And my question here is, like, I'm being in a transition from a project lead to a project manager. So I have a question on retrospective. Thing is, the action item which we have recorded, I being a project manager, Scrum Master. So I just wanted to know about to tackle the things or to handle the things within the scope, within the budget, nor within the schedule. This is getting
Sorry, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you clearly. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to be difficult. The core of what I've heard so far is around the difference between project manager and Scrum Master, somehow in respect to retrospectives. Can anybody hear more clearly than I? No, I'm sorry. Could you type in? Raghavendra? Could you type in the gist of your question? Thank you. You've got a great question, I can see. The problem is that your audio is not your friend. Tell you what, while we give Raghvendra a moment to type so that he doesn't feel pressure to type at an insane speed, does anybody else have a question? And we'll circle back in a moment when he's managed to type out his question. That way we don't pressure anybody.
Mark, I see one question by Arpan on the chat. Shall I read it?
Oh, yeah, go for it. Yeah.
What's the one thing, your empirical views, that we should stop or avoid in retrospectives?
Well, the problem is, of course, I've never sat in on any of your retrospectives, so I don't know. Now,
that's why I mentioned in bracket that it's complete your empirical views, please.
So it's less around stop and more around to reflect on how to facilitate. Too many teams shut down discussion early on problems. Have you seen there's a diagram, there's a well-known picture, there's a diamond picture in Sam Kainer's book, that too many teams have a discussion that looks like this. Problems here, tiny discussion around their problem point, and then they come to solution there, and boom, they shut down discussion early. They had no insight generation. In his book, he then opens up the diagram and he says, there should be a period of painful discussion in the middle where people wander around feeling a bit lost as they explore and more deeply understand the problem, and that way come up with more systemic solutions to their problems and not surface level. So as a facilitator, it's not what I want you to stop doing. It's that I want you to, as a facilitator, to find a way to foment insightful discussion so that as long as the discussion remains insightful and that they're exploring more widely and growing, we don't shut down discussion early, that we actually get people to have deeper discussions before shutting down and going to action. Did that hand-wavy picture make sense? Somebody who knows Sam Kainer can probably pull up that picture on the internet. There's a fairly well-known version of that. I even have a copy of it in my ebook. And then somebody, is it a good idea to show the sprint reports in a retrospective? So, a funny thing, I don't like burn down charts. I do not like sprint burn down charts. In fact, I just finished writing an article for the Scrum Alliance that shows why you should probably abandon your sprint burn down chart. And I end the article with a bastardization and a misuse of Shakespeare. I say, I come not, like Brutus, I come not to praise burn down charts, but to, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with my Shakespeare off the top of my head. I did my best to destroy burn down charts. So I don't use them. I also don't like velocity. Can all of you guys find 5 reasons why velocity is a truly awful measure of anything meaningful? Have some fun. What are good reasons why burn down charts are, why velocity is awful?
I don't feel velocity is a good measure because, if we achieve 65 or 70 points of velocity sprint on sprint, that's not showing me anything consistently. We are doing something, but lead time, cycle time actually contributes more on when we are picking up things and when we are doing things and how fast we do. So velocity and burn down, I generally don't prefer actually calculating them as a quantitative metric.
Yeah.
Mark, one thing what I always think about velocity is, in India, whenever we invest money in equity, like mutual funds and all, there is always a tagline at the bottom that past data is not a guarantee for future performance. So velocity is similar to that. It is only it is only a metric that the team can use internally to see how they can put a ballpark schedule, or they can say that, okay, within sprints we can do it. But that is not an external metric that we can use it as a productivity metric, or as a reflection of the team's agility and all. So it is not like that. It's like how we give a blade someone to shave. Rather shaving, people are trying to cut the throats of people. That is as it has become velocity. So velocity is not a good metric at all.
Yep. Okay. Other reasons I don't like velocity. Velocity does not correlate with the value delivered.
And I also see velocity as sort of a marketing technique to sell agile into the organization, to the management, saying, see, from 60 they moved to 70, from 70 they moved to 80. They are performing high. Where are we ending up in that journey? And management says, oh yeah, we are agile and we have seen good show. Yeah, that's what it is for.
Sai, I love your way of phrasing it. Other ones for fun. With velocity, have any of you met a team that could find a way to double their velocity very quickly? I can double your velocity in the next sprint for you. How do you double your velocity in the next sprint?
It's simple.
More story points.
I'll tell you. You have like $10 coins. You make them like 50-cent coins. You'll get 20. Simple. Nice. Double the velocity.
Nice. Okay. So that's I believe Vijay's just described the double your estimates method. Okay. So I double my estimates. I double my velocity. Here's another way velocity goes wrong. Have you ever heard this from a team? Testing is for wimps who don't get it right on the first try. We don't test. We just deliver features because we go faster. Okay. Velocity, and somebody, I believe Nikki put this in the chat for us. Velocity puts pressure on the team members, even if the team members are only reporting velocity to themselves. It puts a subtle pressure on themselves to be, quote, better. It's a random number. Okay, so what would I measure more effectively? Well, so Sai has shared this. I've said this a few times. I tend to prefer to measure cycle time. Lead time's not a bad one. If you're measuring cycle time, there is a version of velocity that can help in the long run, but it's subtle. I tend to measure story count. I tend to measure the number of items completed. Strangely, if the team learned to complete more items, usually it's because they're delivering more small items. The worst thing that teams can do when they deliver more items is slice the items into smaller chunks. Since generally slicing work into smaller chunks in an agile world is good, when they game the metric, we seem to have done something good. Now, probably your place of employment will insist on measuring velocity, even though I strongly advise against it. So if you have a continued version of that disease, you might want to read Dan Vicanti's book, Actionable Agile Metrics. He's a very consistent guy. Can you see he names his plugin Actionable Agile? He named his book Actionable Agile. He's very consistent, Actionable Agile Metrics. Now, I owe Raghavan his answer, and he's very kindly typed things in. Thank you, sir. So you're transitioning from a lead to a project manager in a startup company. As a project manager, also Scrum Master, you've had experience in schedule, deadline, and faced challenge to complete the retrospective within budget and time. So you're never going to win the budget and time game. Doesn't matter if you're in a startup, doesn't matter if you're in a big company. You can't. So it's not going to be retrospectives that are going to cause you to win the budget and time game. Here's what's going to help. And the Dan Vicanti guy has another book, first of all, that may help a few of you. He has a second book. The book is called When Will It Be Done? Here's what he will teach you. When you play the velocity game, which is where you're all pressured to play, the pressure is going to be, what will it take to go faster? You can't win at that game. Here's how I change it. Anytime I have a number like velocity, I go get people not to look at the number. In fact, I don't want your management to ever even be allowed to see the velocity number. I want it to be hidden behind a shield. I know that won't happen, but morally it should be hidden. I then want your management to see the product backlog, and you can draw lines in the product backlog. So Rag, you said, sorry, I apologize. I assume I can call you Rag because I'm going to die trying to say your full name. I apologize. Okay. I'll admit it. I'm not very good yet with Indian names. That'll come next week, but not this week. Raghav. There we go. Thank you, Raghav. So with your product backlog, you have a deadline. You have to get something done by date X, right? So use the velocity to draw a line. The velocity is simply the average number of work items you're getting done per sprint, yes? If that's correct, then multiply the number of sprints implied by the date by your velocity, count down your product backlog, and draw a line. That line is your average line. Now, I'm going to make you very uncomfortable with the next statement. The next statement is that all you have actually done is drawn a 50% likelihood line. When you draw an average line in your product backlog, it is 50% likely you will get as far as that line by the time time ends. Half the time you'll do better, half the time you'll do worse. So good people with good mathematical backgrounds would want to draw lines for 20% likelihood and 80% likelihood. I don't have any presentation material for this because it wasn't something I was prepared to do. This is something I do with my product owners in my product owner workshops. Can you imagine the following? Count using whatever overpriced electronic tool you use, Jira or something else that's actually better for you if you'd like. Simply look at the average velocity for your worst 3 sprints in the past year, your average for your best 3 sprints in the past year, and your average for the last 3 sprints. Update those averages on a regular basis. One of them, the worst 3 sprints, is your low confidence interval. The average is your average confidence interval. The high one is your high confidence interval. Can you see if you draw 3 lines in your product backlog, those 3 lines will then will then show you how far you will likely get before time is done. And can I share docs? Yes, probably. I have a blog on my website. Excuse me for looking at my own website. Yep.
Mark, I have one question. The estimation that you just right now, it's like the 3-point estimation that we do we used to do in the olden days. Like you take a best case scenario, a worst case scenario, and then you take the current one and then divide it by 3, and then you add and then take the average. So will that not put the folks back into a waterfall kind of mindset?
Yes, but 2 things that are different about this. I am doing my best to convince you to, so I've thrown a blog post into the chat. The blog post isn't sufficient for this problem. So I do not want you to stare at the graph. The graph is not the point. Here's where this differs. In the old world, you stared at a graph and you studied the graph and meditated on the graph. Here's how I would change it in the Agile world. The graph is just the information to be the input into the product backlog to show people where they will get in the product backlog. Let me see if I can find I've got maybe 1 article on this. No, I don't. Sorry, the search on my website's telling me that when I search for 80% or even 80, I'm not finding what I need. I'll take a risk. I'm going to pull up a mural. I'm going to, with apologies, I was not thinking about this before this workshop, before we hung out. And I know it's late India time. I apologize. I'm going to the main mural in a CSPO workshop. Velocity is not a very good, hint. Measurement of lines of code is also a form of random number. If somebody's asking about measurement of lines of code, are you aware that if you measure lines of code, can any of you deliver more code than is necessary to solve a feature? Do you want to have the most code to deliver a feature or the least code to deliver a feature? Least or most? Least code.
Least.
Least code, I see. So if you measure lines of code, what do you think you're going to get?
No, I mean, if the velocity is not a good metric, I mean, combination of kilolines of code plus, the story points plus the number of features would give some view of the productivity of the team. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a hint. Why do you care about your team's productivity?
I mean, if the management might care, right? Okay,
Okay.
Last month you delivered, let's say, 10 features. How do we increase the speed of delivery, right? So,
okay. So let's ask yourself.
Can I add my perspective here, Mark?
Please do, Sai, and then I'll go. You first and then me.
Okay, what I would prefer or I would like to do is because maybe I would see more on code coverage or number of bugs that are being logged in a sprint, because I am again aiming towards a quality product with the release on demand sort of a thing. So the better code coverage that we bring in with the number of tests that we add and the number of bugs that we actually catch in the sprint will enhance the quality, and that I will showcase to the management saying that we are doing a good quality product. So this is my perspective.
Well played. I'm going to nudge you in a different, so well played to Sai. Here's where I'm going to nudge you. When you measure something in a system, you should be able to answer the following question. The question you should be able to answer is, if I measured this, what improvement would I make on the basis of that measurement? And if you cannot answer that question, then you should not measure it. So the problem I have with the productivity measure, so everybody is searching for productivity. Trust me on this one. I've had people searching for productivity. I've searched for productivity. The problem with productivity is that you can't tell me what you would improve, how you would change. But now I owe Rag, and he's not going to find his answer in a lot of other sources. So the metrics question, the hint on metrics, there is a metrics blog post on our website. I have a fairly long list of metrics, and sometime probably in the fall, we'll update it again massively, and we'll rewrite it again from scratch, and it'll be longer and have more words and have more content. It won't be any smarter. But to help poor Rag, there's no way you're going to find this. So because this is, I know where I wrote this, and I know most of you aren't going to have access to this. So I'm sharing something from my CSPO workshop. This is what I was trying to explain before. Is this mostly visible on your monitors?
yes.
So here we have, this is a clearly mythical team. But we've got 5 sprints with this mythical team. After 5 sprints, we draw an average case line, a worst case line, and a best case line. Please appreciate these numbers are fictional. This is entirely meant to illustrate. But when Vijay said, how does this differ from the traditional world? It differs from the traditional world that I don't want your management to look at the graph. I want them to look at the product backlog. I draw the worst case line, I draw the average case line, I draw the best case line. So in X weeks' time, here's where we could be. If I do that, how does that change the conversation? Where does it move the conversation from? What does it move it to?
Well, Mark, here I see there are two scenarios. One is if the management has a lot of confidence in the team, and if the teams are in a state that they can drive the delivery, then probably they will go with an average or worst case. I mean, that is what they will promise the business, or they will have an agreement with the business, and that is how the things will flow, and they'll inspect and adapt in the upcoming sprints. But on the other hand, I have seen a couple of instances where the management comes back and starts micromanaging why can't you move the best why can't you deliver the best case scenario, what is that you are doing daily, you are sitting in office for 8 hours. So that kind of conversation might also be on the flip side.
Oh, well, there's a risk of that, but then we have to deal with the underlying problem in that case. The underlying problem seems to be something around the behavior of the management. No change in measurement system will change bizarre or insane behavior from the management. But what I can do is can Raghav, I can't see him anymore visually, having flipped. Can Raghav at least see how a model like this causes? So my game for this is I want you to take, this is empiricism, this is empirical data. You have this data on the basis of how actual teams perform. And since you have this data, you can use this to have a conversation with your management about what their trade-offs are and priority are. Yep, go for it.
Sorry. Yeah, if I may say that once you give them the best case, worst case, and the average case, now depending on whether the management is conservative or on the more on the other side, they would at least have some data to make a decision to going forward. Not just the average, but they've got the worst, bad, and the average. So I mean, that just gives them a little bit more data, and they will be able to make a decision in a more confident way. Then it depends entirely on how much trust do they have in their team to go towards the worst case or the best case. So that is the decision that they can make. We are just giving them better data to make a proper decision.
And done well, you're going to nudge them to prioritization. So this is my Aikido movement.
Yes.
So back to the Aikido thing we were making jokes about earlier, but my Aikido move is to push the management away from worshiping numbers and towards decisions about priority for business decisions and product backlog items. And now we have to wrap it up. You guys need to relax and enjoy your evening or your night. And I should go eat lunch and perhaps greet my teenager who just came downstairs. Or actually past my office, but it's complicated. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark, for this lovely session.
Thanks, Nanda. Thanks, Suresh.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Suresh.
Stay. Don't go.
Just stay for a couple of minutes.
Thanks. Okay. First of all, thank you so much, Mark, for your insightful presentation and the discussion. And what I liked about the presentation and the discussion is about Mark is straight to the point, no fluff, no theory. It's all actionable, right? So we can practice all these things. That's what is the great presentation about. So to the audience, these sessions are so important because the continuous learning is extremely important. What you learn in the CSM and other classes is only a starting point, but the practitioners coming and sharing this kind of knowledge is, you don't get it anywhere. And I know the people like Scrum Masters struggle in the organization, but don't not paying attention or spending time to learn. These opportunities are free opportunities. And I would say you guys need to really make use of them as often as possible. This learning, you are getting knowledge from the experts of who has been practicing for years now. And also you get a SUE from Scrum Alliance, which is useful for your upgrading your or renewing your certifications and all that stuff, right? So this is maximum value you get. And so this is a platform we created, SpreadAgile, by Suresh, myself, and Vijay, to bring in the expertise like Mark and others and on a regular basis to share, because anyway, you guys listen to us all the time. So even we are very interested in bringing in and different perspective and different thought process. And I can attend my Scrum class again with one of the CSTs and learn something new all the time, right? Myself. So there is nothing like we know everything all the time, right? We need to learn. So this conversation has diverged a little bit into metrics and all that stuff. One point I just want to make, in my CSM class, I asked this question: how much time do you spend in really adding value versus how much time do you spend in justifying, tracking, accounting that you're adding value? And the best number I got so far is a 40-60, 60 on the wrong side. And you can imagine if Scrum Masters and other leaders spending 60% of their valuable time just to make somebody happy. What's the point of that? Rather, 60% of the time you use in adding value itself, right? That's what is important. So don't just do the metrics for the sake of making somebody happy. Think about reason behind it. Somebody comes and says, I want to improve this. Why? I want this metric. Why? What are you trying to improve? What is the best way to measure that? And research and do just enough until you improve that. If that metric is not improving anything, then probably that's not the right metric. And you want to go to a different metric. And that is inspect and adapt, right? And a lot of people who collect metrics probably don't have an idea why they're collecting the metrics. That's because somebody asked them to collect it. Rather, you need to really understand why you're collecting something. Is it really helping to improve? Right? That is just my couple of lines of advice on the metrics. And again, retrospectives, a lot of material is available, and Mark's material is excellent, as well as there is other material available. And I need to mention the lady Madhavi Ladala from our community. She's from Hyderabad, and she wrote that latest book, Retrospectives for Everyone. It's a very good book, and I encourage everybody to read. And I should mention because she's in our community, and so everybody should be aware of that. All right. And so keep watching for SpreadAgile activities. We'll be having some activity every month. And this is one of the biggest gatherings we have. And we would like to have more of this. And we continue to bring expertise so that you get benefited out of it. And have a good one and stay safe. Get vaccinated if you haven't done yet.
Thank you, Suresh. And thanks, Mark, for it was